Well, Blumhouse, you're 0 for 2 so far this year. Hi everybody, Anthony here from Awesome Anthony Productions, and today I'm going to give you my review of the latest PG-13 horror film from Blumhouse, Imaginary. But before we get started, you know exactly what to do. At the end of the video, if I've earned it, please leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss any of my new content. Now let's get into it. Directed by Jeff Wadlow, Imaginary stars Jurassic Park Dominion's DeWanda Wise as Jessica, a children's author who just married a musician named Max, played by Tom Payne, and is now stepmother to his two daughters, teenage Taylor, played by Tegan Burns, and little Alice, played by Piper Braun. They decide to move in together to Jessica's home that she grew up in, which she hasn't been to since a traumatic incident in her childhood, and upon moving in, Alice finds a teddy bear in the basement who she starts calling Chauncey. She becomes attached to this bear very quickly, spends all of her time with him, talks to him, and even makes his voice back so that she can have conversations with herself, and refuses to let anyone even touch him. But Max and Jessica just chalk it up to a little girl playing with her imaginary friend. But as Alice's behavior starts to grow increasingly odd whenever she's with Chauncey, Jessica starts to realize that Chauncey may not be just a stuffed bear, he may be a demonic presence, and they need to do what they can to save Alice before Chauncey takes her forever.
That's spooky.
I'm not gonna lie, the trailers got me very hyped for this movie. An evil bear attaching itself to a little girl and forcing her to do increasingly f***ed up things? Sign me up! But then I heard this would be PG-13, and just like with Night Swim, my excitement dropped drastically.
Oh man, this is gonna suck!
PG-13 horror can be done well if the writing, suspense, and payoff are all there, but unfortunately for this one, it misses the mark on all three of those. The writing here is painfully mediocre and cliche, once again relating the main monster to the main character's trauma.
Ha! Never heard that one before.
Actually, we've seen this a million times before, and even done in a much better way. Check out Smile for a good example of that. And even though they try to change things up with a couple of twists to the formula, it mostly falls pretty flat, and this cliche nature of the script extends to everything else in the movie. A perfect example is Jessica's relationship with her new stepdaughter, Taylor.
That can't be good.
Now let me ask you something. If you went into a movie with very low expectations and you heard that the main character is becoming a new stepmother to a teenage girl, how would you expect that teenage girl to act to the new stepmother? If you answered,
Bitchy.
you'd be correct. That actually brings me to my next point regarding the writing. The characters here are so ridiculously one note, I'm honestly struggling to recall anything about them that can set them apart from any of the other bland, cardboard cutout characters that are in other mediocre horror movies like Night Swim. Jessica has trauma she hasn't dealt with, how original. Max is hardly in the movie enough to say anything about him. Taylor has nothing but bitchy attitude to offer to everyone in the movie until she randomly decides to start being nice, and Alice is that typical little cute girl archetype. There's nothing here to really grasp onto that will make you root for these characters.
Firmly grasp it.
And the movie honestly doesn't even try to give it to you. It just lazily moves from each set piece or scary sequence to the next. And by the time Jessica gets any backstory or development, it's too little too late.
Too late.
Regardless of how much DeWanda Wise is trying to make it work, because she is a good actress and she's definitely giving it her all here. And her old neighbor Gloria, played by Betty Buckley, is totally interchangeable with any number of mystical, magical, helpful people that show up in every cliche horror movie and suddenly know everything about what's going on.
I don't believe you.
The writing for this plot is nearly non-existent too, lazily moving along like I said before while saving the real story for a few exposition dumps in the third act that just feel clunky. As for the suspense, sure, it's there. If you've never seen a horror movie before, but for those of you who have seen at least a handful of movies involving possessions or a possessed evil object or whatever, none of these scares will do it for you at all, especially the big Chauncey jump scare that's in the trailer. There are a couple of moments here and there that I thought were interesting enough, especially when we actually get to go into Chauncey's realm and see that cool practical set that they set up, and another practical part that I won't spoil that did surprise me, even if it did look pretty goofy at times.
You're goofy.
But not only are 99% of the scares here jump scares, they're telegraphed in such obvious ways that the second that a character is alone, the music dies down, and they start looking around slowly, you know exactly what is coming. You just wait for the scare to come, and instead you get a big sound effect and very little payoff. And speaking of very little payoff, this movie could have been called Imaginary, the payoff that never comes. I think that joke was funnier in my head.
You suck!
The story in this goes nowhere, like I've said a few times already, and once the movie does try to actually scare you, it shows you nothing. That's another issue with this movie being rated PG-13, where other R-rated cliche horror films, regardless of how bad they may be, actually do show you something every now and then, whether it's blood or gore, or they give payoff to the jump scares, especially Smile, like I said earlier. That movie can be considered very formulaic and cliche, but the way it handles its subject matter and builds up the jump scares and actually gives payoff makes that worthwhile.
Damn straight.
But this one is just scared to do it, probably because they really wanted that PG-13 rating so they can make as much money as possible, just like we saw a couple months ago with Night Swim. Anytime there's a scare or a scene where you expect a character to get hurt or scared or whatever, it almost always cuts away from the action or has someone interrupt the scene before it gets good, robbing the movie of any of that fun stuff that people go to see horror movies for. Even that scene in the trailer with Alice about to smack her hand onto that fence panel, one that actually got me excited for the movie, waiting to see what kind of messed up shit it holds, is cut completely short with no payoff once again.
Just give me something. Anything.
One thing I will say that kept me interested in this movie is that there are a few pretty funny lines, intentionally so. But for every one of those, there are another 10 unintentionally funny lines that are just ridiculous, like a scene where a therapist comes in and starts recording Alice while she's having a conversation with Chauncey, only for Alice to turn around and show that she's not moving her mouth, Chauncey's talking on his own.
No way.
So what does she say to Jessica? She asks her, "Has Alice taken up any hobbies lately? Like ventriloquism?" It's moments like this that occasionally bring the film from cliche, bland territory into so bad it's good territory, but it didn't happen nearly enough for me to stay invested into it. I could keep going about all the ways this movie let me down, like the half-baked attempt at saying something about trauma, the way that motivations and characterizations for a few characters change on a dime, or the lack of real strong explanation for what Chauncey even really is, but I think I've said enough. Maybe catch it on streaming if you're interested, want something to half pay attention to while you're doing something else, or if you have a kid that's like a preteen or something and wants to have a scary movie to put on during a sleepover. But if you're a die-hard horror fan like I am, I would not pay to go rush out to see it. Blumhouse, like I said in the beginning, you're 0 for 2 this year. Let's see if you can bring us any good shit in 2024. Please. And that's my review of Imaginary. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this review, you know exactly what to do. I said it in the beginning. Please leave a like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you never miss any of my new reviews. While you're at it, you can scroll down the description below, find the links to my social media, leave a comment, let me know if you saw the movie and what you thought, and if you want more of my content, you can click or tap on these cards right here. I'll take you to my review of Dune Part 2, or just over to my channel where you can check out my reviews, my shorts, and my old shit. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I will see you next time for my review of Kung Fu Panda 4.
Skadoosh.